I want to start today with a dilemma that I think keeps a significant portion of our listeners up at night.
Hmm.
It's this tension that feels almost, biological. On one side, you have this burning personal passion, something you feel you were just engineered to do. Maybe it's
Hmm.
writing, maybe starting a company, maybe it's painting. And then on the other side, you have the immediate, crushing, undeniable weight of reality.
The bills, the mortgage, all of it. It's the classic head versus heart conflict. But I think for the modern professional, the stakes feel incredibly high because we tie our identity so tightly to our output.
Exactly. And I think most of us operate under this really stressful binary assumption. You either follow your dreams and live this exciting, fulfilled Technicolor life,
Or you sell out.
or you sell out for stability. You take the corporate job, you bury the passion, and you, I don't know, lose a piece of your soul forever. It feels like a zero-sum game.
That is absolutely the dominant narrative. We love the story of the risk taker who bets the farm and wins. We don't really tell many stories about the guy who keeps the farm to feed his kids.
But that's what we're doing today. We are unpacking a fascinating piece of writing that just challenges that binary completely. We're doing a deep dive into a text titled The Alchemist of Sacrifice.
Right.
I have to say, when I first saw that title, I was a little skeptical. It sounds a bit mystical, maybe a little too self-helpy for me.
I get that.
Yeah.
But it's actually incredibly grounded. I describe it less as a fairy tale and more as a case study. A case study on value, time, and the physics of ambition.
Okay, I like that. The physics of ambition.
Yeah, the text argues that what we often view as giving up or selling out, as
Yeah.
you said, can actually be a highly strategic, albeit incredibly painful form of preparation.
Painful is the word here.
Right.
We aren't going to sugarcoat this. The source material is brutally honest about the emotional toll of putting a dream on ice. But the mission for us today is to see if we can reframe that pain. Is it possible the dream isn't dying in that scenario, but, I don't know, evolving?
That's the core question.
Yeah.
We're going to explore this idea that sacrifice isn't a passive loss. It's not just things disappearing from your life, but that it's actually an active building process.
Okay, so to understand that, we have to start where the protagonist started, with the weight of the choice.
Absolutely.
So let's set the scene. The text introduces us to a man who, like a lot of us, had a vivid vision for his future. And this wasn't some vague wish to be famous.
It was specific.
It was very specific. The text says he imagined recognition, impact, and personal fulfillment. He had a craft he wanted to master.
He had the fire. He
Mm.
had the talent. But then the narrative just immediately juxtaposes that vision with the intrusion of reality. And it's not a villain. It's just life.
Its bills didn't wait, and family needed him.
Exactly.
And this is where the story diverges from, the Hollywood script. In a movie, this is the moment he packs a bag and goes to New York to make it big.
Right.
But here, the decision is described as quiet, almost invisible. He prioritizes security. He gets the steady job. He chooses family over ambition.
And that invisibility is what makes it so relatable. Nobody throws you a parade for paying the electric bill on time instead of finishing your screenplay. It's a silent heroism that feels internally like a defeat.
But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Isn't this just a coping mechanism? I mean, are we just trying to tell people who failed, don't worry, it's actually strategy? How does the text distinguish between that and just quitting?
That is the crucial distinction.
Yeah.
And the text, it addresses this by focusing on his internal state.
Yeah.
If he had just quit, he would become bitter, checked out, apathetic.
But he wasn't.
Not at all. The description of his emotional state suggests something much more active and volatile.
Yeah, let's talk about that emotion. Because it is visceral.
Yeah.
The text doesn't say he was just bummed out. It says he felt an ache every morning
Mm-hmm.
and a lingering regret every night.
Right. Apathy is the sign of quitting. Agony is the sign that the dream is still alive. That ache he felt. That was the tension of his potential pushing against the container of his reality.
That's a heavy burden to carry, though. There's a specific detail that really got me, and I think anyone with a LinkedIn account will relate to this.
I think I know what you're going to say.
The comparison with friends who pursued their ambitions. Watching your peers succeed while you feel like you're stuck in neutral, the text says a part of him felt trapped.
And that feeling of being trapped is essential. He told himself that love was worth the cost. And he did. He truly loved his family. But the author makes it clear. The feeling of loss was real. We can't skip over that part. He thought he'd given up the best part of himself.
Oh, we have this tragedy in the first act. He's doing the right thing, but it feels like a total defeat. He's a provider now, a robot.
But this is where it gets really interesting. This is where we shift from tragedy to the alchemy in the title. We enter the phase of the story that deals with the quiet years.
Yeah, the years where the dream felt distant. To be honest, reading this section, it sounded like drudgery. Just endless days of work, commute, sleep, repeat.
On the surface, absolutely, it looks like the grind. But if we look closer, this is the pivot point. This is where the reframing happens. The protagonist has a realization that giving up didn't mean losing everything.
Okay, unpack that for me. Because from the outside, he's just working a 9 to 5. What is he actually gaining besides a paycheck?
So the text breaks this down into what I'd call micro habits of survival. It wasn't just discipline in the abstract. It describes how he had to compartmentalize his brain to survive. For example, he had a 40-minute commute. That became his university.
So the constraint actually forced a higher level of focus.
Precisely. The text argues that when you have all day to work on your passion, you can be wasteful. You wait for inspiration, you tinker. But when you have a family relying on you, you become lethal with your time.
He learned to do in 15 minutes what his younger self took 3 hours to do.
Because he simply didn't have the luxury of wasted time.
That's the time management piece, but it sounds like it's deeper than that. It's almost like a compression of efficiency.
It is. And there's another skill he acquired. Perspective, or what the text calls the decentralization of the ego.
That sounds fancy. What does that mean in practice?
Well, think about the younger version of him. The source implies he was maybe a little reckless, purely idealistic. His ambition was about his recognition, his impact.
His name on the door.
Exactly. But the years of sacrifice taught him to operate for the benefit of a collective, his family. He shifted from an ego-driven mindset to a service-driven one.
So he stopped being the main character in his own movie?
In a way, yes. And that is a superpower in leadership. The text says he was preparing without realizing it. He was building the foundation of a skyscraper while he thought he was just digging a hole.
I like that image. Digging a hole versus digging a foundation. They look exactly the same for a very long time.
They do. And this brings us to a concept the author introduces that I found fascinating, the dormancy paradox.
I missed that term, but I think I saw the analogy. Walk us through it.
It's a botanical idea. There are certain seeds, often the ones that grow into the largest, most resilient trees, that require a period of darkness and pressure and cold to trigger germination.
Okay.
If you expose them to light, to immediate success, too early, the root system never develops properly and they just wither.
So the argument is that his lack of success wasn't a delay, it was a biological necessity.
Yes. The text claims that had he succeeded in his 20s, he would have burned out or collapsed under the weight of it. The drudgery was actually the root system developing in the dark.
That's a powerful reframe. But, I mean, eventually the plant has to break the surface, right?
Of course.
Let's talk about the return of the dream. The source says an opportunity came quietly.
This is key. It wasn't a lottery win. It was a project that aligned with his old passion. But, and this is the important part, it required the new skills he had built in the corporate world.
And this is the test, right? Because if I'm him, I might be terrified. I'd be thinking, I'm too old, I'm rusty, I missed my shot.
Oh, the fear was there. But notice how the source describes his reaction compared to his younger self. The younger self would have been frantic, desperate to prove himself.
And the older self?
The older self. The text says he was intelligent, strategic, and acted with a heart full of purpose.
Not as recklessly as before. That line stood out to me.
He approached the opportunity like a professional, not like a desperate artist. He had the stability of his sacrifice years backing him up. He wasn't working to eat anymore. He was working to build.
And that changes everything. You negotiate differently when you aren't desperate.
100%. The text asserts that the doors opened because he was ready, not just because he got lucky. He had built strength, resilience, and patience. Those aren't qualities you get from a textbook.
No, you get them from the specific struggle of putting someone else first for a decade. It changes the narrative from I wasted 10 years to I spent 10 years in high-altitude training.
And that training pays off.
Yeah.
When he finally achieved that recognition he craved as a young man, the source notes that the texture of victory was different.
Success was sweet, but different. I love that line. But let's dig into that. Why was it different? Just because he was older?
It was different because it wasn't solitary. The younger victory would have been a lonely peak. This victory was shared with the family who inspired the sacrifice.
That connects back to the ego thing we were talking about.
Right. If he had succeeded young, it might have been about vanity. Now, the success is communal. The people who were the reason he couldn't pursue the dream are now the ones celebrating it with him.
That's a huge point. We see so many people get massive success and their personal lives just implode because they don't have that foundation.
Exactly. He had the ballast to keep the ship upright.
Mhm.
He already knew who he was outside of his career.
There's also a section here about the ripple effect. I think this is really important for anyone feeling like their sacrifice goes unnoticed.
Yes. This is where the story becomes about legacy. It breaks down what different groups of people saw in him. His children didn't just see a successful dad. They saw something else.
They saw integrity. They saw a man who kept his promises.
And his friends, the ones he was so jealous of earlier.
They saw resilience, and maybe, I'd guess, a little bit of envy for his stability.
And his colleagues saw passion reignited. That's profound. By deferring his dream, he didn't just achieve a goal, he demonstrated a way of living.
The source has this beautiful line. The man who gave up his dream became the man whose life taught others how to live fully.
That's a legacy you just can't build overnight.
It really drives home the idea that sacrifice is not failure.
That is one of the big aha moments for me. We equate stopping with failing. In our culture, if you aren't moving forward, you're dying. But the source is so adamant, dreams can be deferred without being destroyed.
And another one that stuck with me, patience compounds into opportunity. We talk about compound interest with money all the time, but we rarely talk about compounding character.
Right, we think of time passing as just lost time, sand slipping through an hourglass. But if you are maintaining your responsibilities and keeping that ember alive, when you're reading for 20 minutes on the train, staying curious, that time is compounding your readiness.
You're accumulating equity in your own character.
That's a great way to put it.
So let's zoom out. What does this all mean for the listener right now who's in the middle of this?
I think the big picture is that life is nonlinear. The source explicitly says, paths curve. We are conditioned to want the straight line. University, internship, dream job, CEO.
The Forbes list.
The Forbes list, right.
Yeah.
But this story suggests that the curve, that detour into responsibility, the season of sacrifice, is often where the real substance is built.
It reminds me of that distinction we touched on earlier. Buried versus planted.
That is the critical takeaway. When you are in the middle of the sacrifice, you are in the dirt. It's dark. It feels suffocating. It feels like a burial. But the alchemist perspective, that shift in mindset, is realizing it's not a burial, it's a planting.
I think that distinction changes everything about how you wake up in the morning. If you feel buried, you're hopeless, you're just waiting to run out of air. If you feel planted, you're waiting for the season to change.
And you're growing roots, deep roots. The protagonist in our source found a life that was richer than he had ever imagined. Not just career success, but the integration of love and work.
He embraced both worlds. He didn't have to choose one or the other in the end. He just had to choose the order in which he prioritized them.
He trusted the timing, and that requires a tremendous amount of faith.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to challenge our listener a bit. I'm thinking about the person listening to this on their commute, feeling that ache we talked about. Maybe they feel like they've missed the boat.
It's a very real fear, but I think this text offers a different lens.
So here is the provocative thought to leave you with.
Yeah.
The text mentions that he was preparing without realizing it. So the question isn't just, when will I succeed? The question the text forces us to ask is, if you got everything you wanted tomorrow morning, the fame, the pressure, would the current version of you crush it or be crushed by it?
That's the heavy question. Is your deferred dream actually waiting for you to become the person capable of handling it?
If the answer is, I might be crushed, then maybe you should be grateful for the delay. Maybe you aren't falling behind.
Maybe you're just in the training montage.
Trust the process. Keep digging the foundation.
Well said.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.